October 23rd, 2019, 11:21 p.m. A 19-year-old girl walks into a Chevron gas station in Auburn, Alabama. She's picking up snacks, maybe some chips, a drink, normal late-night stuff. She's smiling, chatting with the cashier, completely unaware. Unaware that a man is watching her from across the store. A man who shouldn't be there. Shouldn't be anywhere near the public. A man who, just months earlier, had been charged with kidnapping, with beating someone so badly they nearly died. A man who was supposed to be locked up. But instead, he was free. Out on bond. Walking around, shopping at the same gas station, watching, waiting. Her name was Aniah Blanchard, 19 years old, daughter, sister, friend, college student, with her whole future ahead of her. In less than 90 seconds, she would walk out of that gas station, and she would never be seen alive again. But here's what makes this story even more devastating. Aniah's death was preventable. The monster who took her, the system knew he was dangerous. They knew, and they let him walk free anyway. Before we begin, I need you to do something right now. If this story grips you, and I promise you it will, hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel because stories like Aniah's need to be heard. And drop a comment telling me, have you ever felt unsafe at a gas station late at night? What did you do? This video contains discussions of violence and injustice. Everything you're about to hear is based on court records, news reports, and official investigations. I'm sharing Aniah's story with the deepest respect for her memory and her family's pain, and I'm sharing it because what happened to her changed laws and might save your life. Viewer discretion is advised. This is the story of how a simple gas station stop turned into a nightmare, how a violent criminal was walking free when he should have been behind bars, and how one family's unimaginable grief sparked a movement that changed an entire state. Let's begin with the day everything fell apart. To understand what was taken from this world, you need to know who Aniah Blanchard was. Not just a victim, not just a headline, a person, a beautiful, vibrant, full-of-life person. Aniah was born on September 13, 2000 in Birmingham, Alabama. Her mother, Angela Harris, described her as a ray of sunshine from the moment she entered the world. She lit up every room. Angela would later say, everyone who met Aniah loved her instantly. And it was true. Aniah had one of those personalities that just drew people in. She was funny, had this infectious laugh that made everyone around her start laughing too, even if they didn't know what was funny. She was caring, the friend who'd drop everything to help you. No questions asked. She was studying to become a medical professional, wanted to help people, wanted to make a difference. She was also a fighter, literally. Aniah's stepfather was Walt Harris, a professional UFC fighter, and Aniah had grown up around that world of discipline, strength, resilience. Walt loved her like his own daughter. Taught her to be tough, to stand up for herself, to never back down from a challenge. But some challenges, some monsters, even the strongest fighters can't overcome. October 23, 2019, started like any other day for Aniah. She woke up in her apartment near Southern Union State Community College in Opelika, Alabama, about 10 minutes from Auburn. That day, she and her brother had something difficult to do, attend a funeral for a family friend. Funerals are heavy, especially when you're 19 and still figuring out life and mortality and all those big, scary concepts. Aniah and her brother drove together, supported each other through it, came back late that evening. Around 10 p.m., they said their goodbyes, hugged, made plans to see each other soon. Aniah got in her car, a black Honda CR-V that she loved. She was headed home. Just a short drive, but on the way she realized she was hungry, wanted some snacks, so she made a decision that would change everything. She pulled into a Chevron gas station on South College Street in Auburn, 11:21 p.m. A Wednesday night, the gas station was well lit. There were other customers. Staff behind the counter seemed safe enough. Aniah parked, got out, walked inside. Security cameras captured her entering the store. She was wearing a black dress, still dressed from the funeral. She looked tired but calm. She walked down the aisles, picked up some snacks, maybe a drink. Normal, mundane, the kind of thing millions of people do every single night. What Aniah didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that someone else was in that store. Someone who had been looking for an opportunity. Someone who saw her and decided she would be his next victim. His name was Ibraheem Yazeed. And before we go any further, you need to understand exactly who this monster was, and why he was walking free. What I'm about to tell you about this man will make your blood boil, and it will make you question everything you thought you knew about the justice system. Stay with me. Ibraheem Yazeed was 29 years old in October 2019, and he was a violent criminal who should have been in prison. Let me say that again, because it's important. He should have been in prison. In February 2019, just 8 months before he walked into that gas station, Yazeed had been arrested for a horrifying crime. He'd been charged with kidnapping, first-degree robbery, and attempted murder. Here's what happened. Yazeed had abducted 2 people at gunpoint, forced them into a vehicle, robbed them, and then beat one of them so savagely that the victim nearly died. We're talking about life-threatening injuries, skull fractures, internal bleeding, the kind of beating that changes a person forever. Yazeed was arrested, charged. The evidence was overwhelming. And then the system failed. Despite the severity of the charges, kidnapping, attempted murder, a judge granted Yazeed bond, $295,000 bond. His family posted it, and he walked out of jail. Now you might be thinking, how? How does someone charged with kidnapping and attempted murder get bond at all? Great question, and the answer is going to make you furious. In Alabama at that time, the law said that only people charged with capital murder or certain specific violent felonies could be held without bond. Kidnapping? Not on the list. Attempted murder? Not on the list. So violent offenders, people who'd proven they were dangerous, who'd nearly killed someone, could still get bond if they could pay it. And that's exactly what happened with Yazeed. He paid the bond, walked free, was supposed to wear an ankle monitor and follow certain conditions while awaiting trial. But here's the thing about violent predators. They don't follow rules. Yazeed was living in the Auburn area, the same area where Aniah went to school, lived her life, stopped for late-night snacks. He was supposed to be under supervision, supposed to check in regularly. But on October 23, 2019, nobody was watching him closely enough. And when Aniah Blanchard walked into that Chevron station at 11:21 p.m., Yazeed saw an opportunity. A young woman, alone, late at night. Surveillance footage would later show both of them in the store at the same time. Aniah browsing the aisles, completely unaware. Yazeed watching her, following her movements with his eyes. At 11:23 p.m., Aniah paid for her items and left the store. Security cameras capture her walking to her car, getting in, starting the engine, and then nothing. The cameras didn't capture what happened next, but investigators would piece it together from evidence, and what they discovered was absolutely chilling. What happened in those next few minutes? It's the stuff of nightmares. And the evidence left behind told a story that no family should ever have to hear. Don't go anywhere. When Aniah walked out of that gas station at 11:23 p.m., she had every intention of going home. Her apartment was minutes away. She'd be there before midnight, probably scroll through her phone for a bit, eat her snacks, go to sleep. Normal 19-year-old stuff. But Aniah never made it home. Based on evidence collected later, investigators believe that Yazeed followed Aniah out of the store. He approached her car, either forced his way in or convinced her to let him in under some pretense. And once he was inside that vehicle, everything changed. There was a struggle. Physical evidence, blood, signs of violence would later be found inside Aniah's Honda CR-V. Yazeed, a grown man with a history of extreme violence, overpowered her. At 11:30 p.m., just 7 minutes after she left the gas station, license plate readers picked up Aniah's vehicle heading south on Interstate 85, toward Montgomery, away from Auburn, away from her home. Aniah wasn't driving. Her phone went dark around this time, either turned off or destroyed. No more messages. No more location pings. No more Aniah. And the people who loved her had no idea yet that anything was wrong. That night, Aniah's mother Angela expected her daughter to check in. They usually texted goodnight, but the text never came. Angela tried calling. It went straight to voicemail. She told herself not to panic. Aniah was probably tired from the funeral. Probably went straight to bed. But when morning came and there was still no word, Angela knew. That mother's instinct that something was terribly, horribly wrong. October 24, 2019, Thursday morning. Angela called Aniah's friends, her brother, anyone who might have heard from her. Nobody had. She called the apartment, no answer. She drove there herself. Aniah's car wasn't in the parking lot. By noon, Angela was at the police station filing a missing person report. "My daughter is missing," she told them. "This isn't like her. Something's wrong. Please, you have to find her." The Auburn Police Department took the report seriously, started investigating immediately. They pulled surveillance footage from the Chevron station, saw Aniah, saw her leave, and they saw someone else too. A man, watching her. But they didn't know who he was yet. Didn't know that the monster who took Aniah was already in their system. Didn't know that he was supposed to be monitored, supervised, kept away from innocent people. All they knew was that a young woman had vanished. And with every hour that passed, the chances of finding her alive dropped. The next 48 hours would become a desperate race against time. The community would mobilize like never before. But what they found? It would break hearts across the nation. Stay with me through this. Pause right here. Have you ever had someone you love go missing, even for a few hours? That panic is indescribable. Drop a love emoji in the comments for everyone who's felt that fear. When news broke that Aniah Blanchard was missing, the Auburn community did something incredible. They didn't wait, didn't hesitate, didn't assume someone else would handle it. They mobilized. Within 24 hours of Angela filing that missing person report, there were search parties organizing across East Alabama. Students from Southern Union, friends from her childhood, people who'd never even met Aniah but were moved by her mother's desperate pleas. They printed flyers, thousands of them. Aniah's smiling face on every one. They searched parks, parking lots, wooded areas, anywhere a person or a vehicle might be hidden. Social media exploded with Find Aniah. Her story was shared tens of thousands of times. News stations picked it up. The attention was massive. And Walt Harris, Aniah's stepfather, the UFC fighter, made emotional pleas on camera. "Please," he said, his voice breaking, "if anyone knows anything about where Aniah is, come forward. We just want to bring our girl home." The reward fund grew. Started at $5,000. Within days, it was over $100,000. People wanted to help. Wanted to do something. Anything. But behind the scenes, investigators were piecing together a much darker picture. They'd enhanced the surveillance footage from the Chevron station, identified the man who'd been watching Aniah, and when they ran his identity, they couldn't believe what came back. Ibraheem Yazeed, out on bond for kidnapping and attempted murder. They immediately got a warrant, went to his last known address. He was gone. His ankle monitor hadn't been working properly for weeks. Nobody had noticed or cared. Yazeed had vanished, just like Aniah, but he'd left something behind. October 25th, 2019, Friday afternoon. A call came into police from Montgomery, Alabama, about 60 miles south of Auburn. Someone had found an abandoned vehicle in an apartment complex parking lot. A black Honda CR-V. License plate matched Aniah Blanchard's car. Investigators rushed to the scene, secured the vehicle, called in forensic teams. What they found inside made their stomachs turn. Blood. A significant amount of blood. Signs of a violent struggle. Aniah's personal belongings scattered around. The passenger seat had been pushed back. Someone larger than Aniah had been sitting there. The evidence told a clear story. Aniah had been attacked inside her own vehicle. Forensic analysts processed every inch of that car. They found DNA evidence, fingerprints, biological materials, some belonging to Aniah, some belonging to Ibraheem Yazeed. The confirmation investigators had dreaded. Yazeed had been in that car, had been with Aniah, and the amount of blood suggested she'd been seriously injured. The discovery of the car changed everything. This was no longer just a missing person case. This was now a suspected violent crime, possibly a homicide. Angela Harris heard the news and collapsed. Her worst fears were coming true. Walt Harris released another statement, this time with barely contained rage. The monster who did this needs to be caught. Now. Before he hurts anyone else. But Yazeed was in the wind. And Aniah? Still missing. The question that haunted everyone, where was she? The manhunt that followed would span multiple states, and what investigators discovered about Yazeed's actions after taking Aniah? It proved he knew exactly what he'd done. Keep watching. With Aniah's car found and evidence of violence confirmed, law enforcement launched one of the biggest manhunts in Alabama history. Ibraheem Yazeed was now the primary suspect, and he was running. The Auburn Police Department, the Lee County Sheriff's Office, the Alabama Law Enforcement Agency, the U.S. Marshals. Everyone was involved. They tracked Yazeed's movements through surveillance cameras, cell phone pings, witness statements. And they discovered something disturbing. Yazeed hadn't been alone in disposing of evidence. A man named Antoine "Squirmy" Fisher, 35 years old, had helped Yazeed after the attack. Fisher had driven Yazeed around Montgomery, had helped him move Aniah's car to that apartment complex where it was found. Fisher knew what Yazeed had done, and instead of calling police, he helped cover it up. On October 26th, 3 days after Aniah disappeared, investigators tracked Fisher down. They arrested him on charges of hindering prosecution and tampering with evidence, and they interrogated him for hours. Fisher eventually gave up critical information. He told them where Yazeed had gone, what vehicle he was driving, who he might be staying with. The net was tightening. October 30th, 2019. U.S. Marshals got a tip that Yazeed was hiding out in Pensacola, Florida, about 200 miles south of Auburn. They surrounded the location, moved in. Ibraheem Yazeed was arrested without incident at 6 a.m. When they found him, he was trying to alter his appearance, had cut his hair, changed his clothes. He knew what he'd done, and he'd been trying to disappear. Yazeed was brought back to Alabama and charged with first-degree kidnapping. At his initial court hearing, he showed no emotion, no remorse, nothing, just cold, empty eyes. Prosecutors asked the judge to hold him without bond this time. And finally, the judge agreed. Yazeed would remain in jail. No bond, no walking free. But it was too late for Aniah. Because while Yazeed sat in that jail cell, refusing to cooperate, refusing to say where she was, Aniah's family was still desperately searching. Days turned into weeks. Volunteers continued searching, following every lead, checking every wooded area, every abandoned building, every possible location. The reward grew to $105,000. Tips flooded in from across the country, each one investigated, each one leading nowhere. And then, on November 25, 2019, exactly 1 month after Aniah vanished, a hunter made a discovery in a remote wooded area in Shorter, Alabama, about 20 miles from where her car had been found. He called 911 immediately. I think I found a body. What that hunter found would confirm everyone's worst fears, and it would set in motion a legal battle that would change Alabama law forever. You need to stay for this. November 25, 2019. Law enforcement arrived at the wooded area in Shorter, Alabama. They secured the scene, called in forensic teams, prepared for the worst, and they confirmed what they already knew in their hearts. They'd found Aniah Blanchard. She'd been there for over a month, hidden in the woods, alone. The medical examiner determined cause of death, gunshot wound. Manner of death, homicide. Aniah Blanchard, 19 years old, had been murdered. The young woman who just wanted to grab some snacks on her way home. The daughter who lit up every room. The future medical professional who wanted to help people. Gone. When Angela Harris received the call confirming they'd found her daughter, she let out a scream that could be heard throughout the neighborhood, a sound no parent should ever have to make. The sound of a mother's heart shattering into a million pieces. Walt Harris released a statement. Our family is devastated. Aniah was our light, and that light has been stolen from us by a monster who never should have been free to hurt her. Because that's what made this even more unbearable. Aniah's death was preventable. If Yazeed had been held without bond in the first place, like he should have been for kidnapping and attempted murder, he never would have been at that gas station, never would have seen Aniah, never would have had the opportunity to take her life. The system had failed, and Aniah paid the price. On November 27th, Ibraheem Yazeed was formally charged with capital murder. He faced the death penalty. At his arraignment, he stood there emotionless, didn't enter a plea, didn't show any sign of humanity. Prosecutors laid out the evidence. DNA inside Aniah's car matched Yazeed. Surveillance footage placed him at the gas station watching her. Cell phone data tracked his movements. Witnesses testified he'd admitted to being involved. Fisher's testimony connected all the dots. The case against him was overwhelming, but conviction wasn't enough for Aniah's family. They wanted more. They wanted to make sure this never happened again. And that's when Angela Harris made a decision. She would turn her grief into action. Her daughter's death would mean something, would save others. She would fight for a new law, a law that would be named after her daughter, Aniah's Law. What happened next turned a mother's grief into a movement that changed an entire state. This is where Aniah's legacy truly begins. Don't go anywhere. This part is crucial. Real talk. Do you think violent offenders should be allowed bond before trial? I want your honest opinion in the comments. This is important. Hopeful but determined, building strength. In the aftermath of Aniah's death, Angela Harris did something extraordinary. While drowning in grief, while planning her daughter's funeral, while trying to process the unthinkable, she started a movement. Because Angela understood something crucial. Aniah's death wasn't just about one monster. It was about a broken system. A system that let violent criminals walk free while they awaited trial. A system that prioritized a defendant's convenience over public safety. A system that needed to change. Angela partnered with Alabama lawmakers to draft new legislation. They called it Aniah's Law. And here's what it proposed. Under Alabama law, at the time, judges could only deny bond for people charged with capital murder or a few specific violent felonies. But Aniah's Law would expand that list significantly. It would allow judges to deny bond to anyone charged with serious violent offenses, including kidnapping, first-degree rape, first-degree sodomy, sexual torture, domestic violence if there was a previous conviction, violent crimes when the defendant posed a clear threat to public safety. In other words, if you're charged with a violent crime and deemed dangerous, you stay in jail until trial. No bond, no second chances to hurt someone else. Sounds like common sense, right? But it required a constitutional amendment to Alabama's state constitution, which meant it had to pass the Alabama legislature. And then, critically, it had to be voted on by the people of Alabama in a statewide referendum. Angela Harris became the face of the campaign. She traveled across Alabama, spoke at town halls, testified before legislators, shared Aniah's story over and over again, even though each telling ripped her heart open. My daughter should be alive, she'd tell audiences. She should be in school right now, planning her future, living her life. But she's not, because the system failed her. We can't bring Aniah back, but we can honor her memory by making sure this doesn't happen to someone else's child. The movement grew. Crime victims' families joined. Law enforcement organizations supported it. Prosecutors backed it. Even some defense attorneys, while concerned about due process, acknowledged that truly dangerous defendants shouldn't be roaming free before trial. In March 2020, the Alabama legislature passed Aniah's Law with overwhelming bipartisan support. Now it just needed to be approved by Alabama voters. November 2022, Aniah's Law appeared on the ballot as Amendment 1. Angela Harris, Walt Harris, and Aniah's entire family campaigned tirelessly. They held rallies, did interviews, made sure every Alabama voter understood what was at stake. Election night. The results came in. Aniah's Law passed with over 80% approval. 80%. One of the most decisive referendum victories in Alabama history. Angela Harris stood on stage that night, tears streaming down her face. Aniah's name will now save lives, she said. Her legacy is written into law. She didn't die in vain. And she was right. Since Aniah's Law took effect, dozens of violent offenders who previously would have been released on bond have been held in jail awaiting trial. How many potential victims were saved? We'll never know. But we do know this. Aniah's Law works. But while Angela fought for legal change, another battle was just beginning. The trial of Ibraheem Yazeed. And the fight to make sure he would never, ever walk free again. The courtroom battle that followed would reveal horrifying details about what happened to Aniah, and it would test her family's strength in ways they never imagined. Stay with me. The trial of Ibraheem Yazeed took years to reach court. Legal delays, COVID-19 pandemic, defense motions, the wheels of justice turned slowly. But finally, in 2023, Yazeed faced a jury of his peers, charged with capital murder, facing the death penalty. The prosecution's case was devastating. They presented the surveillance footage from the gas station, showed Yazeed watching Aniah, following her with his eyes. They presented the forensic evidence from her car, the blood, the DNA, the undeniable proof that Yazeed had been there. They brought in cell phone experts who tracked Yazeed's movements, showed he'd been in the area where Aniah's body was found. They called witnesses who testified that Yazeed had admitted to being involved. They presented evidence that he'd tried to flee, altered his appearance, hid in another state, actions of a guilty man. And most powerfully, they showed the jury who Aniah was. Photos of her smiling, testimony from friends and family about her dreams, her kindness, her light. The prosecutors wanted the jury to see Aniah as a human being, not just a victim, a person whose life mattered. The defense? They had almost nothing. They couldn't dispute the forensic evidence, couldn't explain away the surveillance footage, couldn't justify Yazeed's flight from justice. Their strategy was to create doubt about whether Yazeed was the one who actually killed Aniah. They suggested maybe Fisher had done it, or someone else. But the evidence pointed overwhelmingly at Yazeed. Angela Harris sat through every moment of the trial, listening to details about her daughter's final moments that no mother should ever have to hear. Looking at the man who'd stolen Aniah from her, waiting for justice. After weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury. They deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict, guilty of capital murder. Yazeed showed no reaction, just stared straight ahead, expressionless. But Angela Harris broke down. Years of grief, of fighting, of waiting, all released in that moment. Justice. Finally, the sentencing phase came next. The same jury that convicted Yazeed would now decide life without parole or death. They heard victim impact statements from Aniah's family. Angela spoke. Aniah was my world. She was sunshine, and this man extinguished her light. He deserves the same fate he gave my daughter, to have his life taken. Walt Harris spoke. I'd do anything to have 5 minutes alone with him, but I'll settle for knowing he'll never breathe free air again. The jury deliberated and returned with their recommendation: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Not the death penalty, but certainty that Yazeed would die behind bars. He would never walk free, never hurt another person, never see the outside world again. For Angela, it was enough, not closure. There's no such thing when you've lost a child, but accountability, justice, a measure of peace knowing the monster was caged forever. But Aniah's story doesn't end in that courtroom. Her legacy and the lessons we all need to learn from her tragedy, that's what matters most. Stay through the end. Reflective, educational, empowering. Aniah Blanchard's story is a tragedy that should never have happened. But from that tragedy came lessons that could save lives. Your life, your daughter's life, your sister's, your friend's life. So let's talk about what we can learn. Lesson 1. Late-night gas station safety. Aniah wasn't doing anything wrong, she was just getting snacks. But predators look for opportunities, and late-night gas stations create them. Here's what you can do to stay safer. If possible, avoid stopping alone late at night. If you need gas or snacks, try to go before 10 p.m. or wait until morning. Choose well-lit, busy locations. Gas stations near highways or in commercial areas tend to be safer than isolated ones. Stay aware. When you're in the store, pay attention to who else is there. If someone makes you uncomfortable, trust that feeling. Leave immediately. Lock your car doors the second you get in. Don't sit there on your phone. Start the car, lock the doors, and drive away. Consider the buddy system. If you're out late and need to stop, text a friend or family member. Let them know where you are. Ask them to stay on the phone with you. These seem like small things, but they create layers of protection. And in a world where predators exist, layers matter. Lesson 2. The bail system needs reform. Aniah's death exposed a massive flaw in how we handle violent offenders before trial. The idea behind bail is simple: innocent until proven guilty. Don't punish people who haven't been convicted. That's a good principle. But it can't override public safety. When someone is charged with kidnapping, with attempted murder, with violent assault, and there's strong evidence against them, they should not be walking free. Not with an ankle monitor. Not with conditions. Not at all. Because ankle monitors fail, conditions get violated, and innocent people die. Aniah's law fixed this in Alabama. But many states still have the same broken system Alabama had before. If you live in a state where violent offenders can still bond out, contact your legislators. Tell them about Aniah. Ask them why your state hasn't passed similar reforms. Demand that public safety comes before a defendant's convenience. Lesson 3. Trust your instincts. We don't know if Aniah felt unsafe that night. We don't know if Yazeed approached her in the store or waited outside. But we do know this. Your gut feeling exists for a reason. If someone makes you uncomfortable, leave. Don't worry about being rude. Don't worry about overreacting. Don't worry about embarrassing yourself. Your safety is worth more than manners. If someone is following you, don't go home. Drive to a police station, a fire station, somewhere public with witnesses. If someone tries to force their way into your car, scream, honk the horn, draw attention. Fight like your life depends on it, because it might. Aniah was strong. She had a UFC fighter for a stepfather. She'd been taught to defend herself, but sometimes strength isn't enough against a monster with a weapon and bad intentions. So we add other layers: awareness, avoidance, escape plans, communication. Lesson 4. Community matters. When Aniah disappeared, her community didn't wait for police to handle it alone. They organized, searched, fundraised, shared her story. That collective action kept pressure on investigators, kept Aniah's case in the public eye, helped gather tips and leads. If someone in your community goes missing, do something. Share their photo, join search parties, donate to reward funds, keep their name alive. Because the more eyes looking, the better chance they're found. These lessons won't bring Aniah back, but they might prevent the next tragedy. And that's what Angela Harris fights for every single day. Aniah Blanchard should be 24 years old right now. She should have graduated from college. Maybe she'd be working in a hospital, helping patients, living her dream. Maybe she'd be in a relationship, thinking about marriage, kids, a future. Maybe she'd be traveling, experiencing the world she never got to see. But she's not here. Because on October 23, 2019, a monster took all of that away. Aniah is buried in Alabama. Her grave is marked with flowers, mementos, and messages from people who loved her, and from strangers who were moved by her story. Angela visits regularly, talks to her daughter, tells her about the law that bears her name, about the lives being saved. "I'd give anything to have her back," Angela says. "But since I can't, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure her death meant something." And it has. Aniah's law has prevented dangerous offenders from bonding out in Alabama. Other states are considering similar legislation, inspired by Aniah's story. Angela Harris has become a national advocate for bail reform. She speaks at conferences, works with legislators, fights for victims' families. Walt Harris has used his platform as a UFC fighter to raise awareness, to talk about Aniah, to push for change. Aniah's friends have started scholarships in her name. They volunteer. They help other families of missing persons. Her light, that light Yazeed tried to extinguish, still shines. Through laws, through activism, through people who refuse to let her be forgotten. This story isn't just about tragedy. It's about resilience. About a mother who turned grief into action. About a community that rallied together. About a legal system that, slowly, painfully, learned to do better. It's about a 19-year-old girl who deserved so much more than she got, but whose legacy will protect others for generations to come. Aniah Blanchard's life mattered. Her death was a tragedy. But her legacy is justice. If Aniah's story impacted you, and I know it did, I need you to do something right now. Like this video. Show me you were here. Show me her story reached you. Subscribe to this channel because I tell true stories that matter. Stories that expose broken systems. Stories that might save your life. Share this video. Send it to every young woman you know, every parent with a daughter, every person who needs to understand why bail reform matters. And in the comments, tell me, what safety precautions do you take when you're out alone at night? What would you add to the list I shared? Let's learn from each other. Let's protect each other. Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for caring about Aniah, about justice, about making the world safer. Until next time, stay aware, stay safe, and never take a single moment for granted. Rest in peace, Aniah Blanchard. September 13, 2000, October 23, 2019. Your light still shines.